Hi, Amanda. Welcome to our podcast, The Artist. And thank you for joining in and thank you for taking our time to be here. It is such a pleasure. And I'm also aware about the fact that you were at the AI Summit in Delhi and I couldn't meet you. But we are going to loop in a few questions from there as well. So, welcome to the podcast. And I can't wait to see what this unfolds.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me along.
Amanda, tell me, when you say open UK and when we say open AI, what do we mean by open and how open is that?
So, when we talk about Open UK, we're talking about the industry organization that I run. And we are an organization that brings together people who work in open technology, so open source, whether it's software, AI, open data, open hardware. And when we talk about open source, we are talking about software or AI primarily, which anyone can use for any purpose. So it's freely available, generally without any charge, and you can use it to build your own things or do your own stuff. When we talk about open AI, we're talking about a company that
Yeah.
has a registered trademark to stop anybody misusing those words as they see it. And it's a very unfortunate thing because having had 30 years of open source software, the natural thing for us to do is to talk about open AI. And we can't do it because a company has taken the name. And originally, that company was about being open and sharing. Elon Musk was one of the original funders. And then it shifted and it shifted to being very closed. So its name was a bit of a misnomer. It's the opposite of what it is.
Right. So, Amanda, tell me this right now when now we recently had a very big summit of AI in Delhi, and you were there, and I was there attending a few of the key sessions.
Mhm.
So, right now, what stage of open AI in terms of the
You're
policy, the
not allowed
structure?
to, you're not allowed to use it because it's a company name. It's hard not to. I always use AI openness. So what stage of AI openness?
AI openness
Yeah.
would be a better thing to say. Yeah. What stage are we in right now?
Yeah.
Right now, 2026.
So specifically for India, we're in an interesting stage. Uh, the conference, the summit, saw more conversations about open source and opening up AI than I think we've seen at many events. And it's the first of the global leaders summits that had open source as a conversation at a level that was quite high and in the closing statement. We saw a document backed by the AI mission at Mighty, which talks about the benefits of open sourcing for India. And after the summit, so during the summit, we saw a small language model, which is very much the direction India is shifting to. We saw it launched in the summit with a commitment to open it up later from Savram, which has now happened. So we have two small language models that are open models, open weights from Savram on a proper open source license that enable people to take them and use them and build their own things on top of them, which is really interesting. So I think India is actually directionally quite far ahead, particularly in the global south.
Wow. All right, that's great. Do you see any fundamental difference in how regions like India, UK, USA are approaching AI policy and framework? Do you see there is a difference, or do you think there's it's more it's more together? They're together in it.
It's not as together as it would be nice for it to be. So I
Okay.
think we saw a drive towards ethics and responsibility and safety when the summit started in 2023. And that's really shifted. And it shifted about a year ago with the Trump administration, with Paris as the summit before India. We saw a shift to security rather than safety, and security is a much narrower thing. We saw less focus, even at the India summit, on governance and global governance, maybe than it would be good to. And we're seeing different standards. So within the EU, they have a very heavyweight law. The UK does not have an AI specific law, that we keep talking about having one and we've not got one. And the US has different state legislation, but not a national federal legislation. So we've got different stages in different places. China's got some AI
Wow.
legislation. They don't all
Uh-huh.
say the same things, and it makes it difficult because when you're producing something
Yeah.
as global consumption, and we've had this in open source software for a long time, it is
Right.
a big challenge if the people consuming have different standards that you have to meet. So I think it is a bit of a challenge, and I think it would be better for society if we could get leaders aligned so that we had a standard. And I think what we're seeing, rather than formal governance, is standards. Have you heard of MCP? MCP is a protocol, model context protocol. And it's an open standard, an open protocol that enables you to connect bits of AI together or to connect AI with the sort of old digital world. That is increasingly being used. You'll find any engineers using it. And I think what we're seeing is standards like that fitting where governance and laws would have, but we don't have them.
We don't have them, and you're saying that the leaders need to be aligned. So who's going to align these leaders? What are
Yeah,
we
there's
going to
a
do?
challenge. Yeah, there's a real challenge, right? We see what's happening in the world today, and we see the challenges on geopolitics. And I think we were more optimistic 18 months, 2 years ago that we might be able to get that global governance. And I suspect that part of the reason it's not being pushed is that if you look at this year's summit,
Yeah.
the prime minister managed to negotiate. They delayed the summit statement from Friday to Saturday because they couldn't get agreement. The rumor was that that was about inclusivity and that the US wouldn't sign up to a statement that included the term inclusive. So we see these disconnects, but I think it was 84, 88 countries signed up to that summit. It was, between 80 and 90. And that's a big deal because the UK and the US didn't sign up to the French one. So getting that consensus probably meant the statement was a little bit more bland, less restrictive, and less governance focused than the direction we've been going in before. But it brought everyone together. So who's going to do it? Well, I think next year we're going to Switzerland, so maybe the Swiss.
Wow. Okay. So the next month Switzerland is important, but Amanda, tell me when it comes to creativity, because
Yeah.
we have a lot of artists listening to the podcast, and
Yeah.
also this is a question that I was trying to pose at the AI Summit in some of the sessions in Delhi. So when we're saying that we are artists and we are creating certain kind of work, now suppose we are making a feature length film that is completely driven by AI, and
Yeah.
suppose it has a figure like, for example, say Martin Luther King, and we are interpreting his life, what happens to the IP? What happens to the copyright? What are the things that we
Yeah.
need to be careful?
So you know that I used to be a lawyer and I was a lawyer for 25
Yes,
years.
yes,
What happens with the IP depends on where you are and how the law on the IP exists to start with and what
yeah,
tools you have.
yeah,
And it depends now on what AI you're using as tools and whether these are AI generated and what rights you've got and what you're using, and whose AI you're using and what it's been trained on and where it's been trained. So what we have is a very, very complex landscape of IP law at the moment. And we have a lot of decisions to be made about whether something created by an AI can have IP in it, whether the person instructing the AI has the rights, whether the AI creator has the rights, whether the AI itself almost has a legal personality so it can own it IP. And then we have the
yeah,
challenge of how the work that you're creating is used by AI for training purposes. And I think
yeah,
we're at a difficult point, and I'm sure lots of your listeners will relate to this. If we are really honest, and it's not just artists and creators, it's also software developers, researchers,
yeah,
we are all content creators. And I say we because I am too. We are
yeah,
content creators.
yeah,
And I think that the IP that we've known all of our lives is probably just so out of date. It no longer
Yes.
protects us.
Yes.
And I don't think we can simply make a small change to law and hope that
Yeah.
it will protect us, right? I think the world's shifted. I have a friend who's an Indian producer, and talking to him, he was talking to me about how the studios own a lot of the rights
Yeah.
these days that traditionally producers would have kept. And I
Yeah.
think actually one of the reasons we have so much friction and upset today around AI and IP from some of the creative sector is
Yeah.
that it's yet another problem in
Yeah.
IP that has been a problem for a long time, right? This is not a new problem created by AI. We talk about it in the context of AI, but really we should talk about it as a bigger picture in the context of studios and how rights have shifted to the big studios,
Yeah.
what we can do to ensure the future
Yeah.
of our creative sector and our artists. What do they need? And what
Yeah.
they need is a way of being sure that they're going to get money, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't
Totally.
really care how. We don't care if it's IP or something else. We just need to know that there is a route for content creators to be paid.
Yeah.
Personally, I expect it will end up with some sort of tax that every individual, the tax we pay contributes to content creators, but also the big IP users, the AI companies, the studios, that they
Yeah.
will end up being taxed, an IP tax on everything they do that will go back to people
Yeah.
using
Yeah.
a rights agency.
Yeah, so definitely the IP is outdated and AI is moving at a very fast pace.
Yeah.
So how do we adjust as artists and creators and filmmakers? What do we need to actually be very careful while we are creating longer length films to be put out there for the world to consume? Where can we actually get caught?
Yeah, I think that you should worry less about getting caught and focus more on how can you learn skills that will help you using AI. So I think you should do what the software engineers are doing and you should get artist tools. So if I talk to a software engineer, they'd be very worried that their jobs are going to disappear because the AI can do some of what they do. And it can, but it doesn't do it the way they do it, if that makes sense. So it doesn't have the discernment and the learning and the skills they bring to it. It only knows how to copy those. So I think there's a real opportunity for creatives to learn new skills using AI tools that will help them produce more easily. And I think that the people who survive and the winners in the long term will be the people who adapt. It's always been this way. I think the part of the hype around AI is that we went through the dot com boom, and I'm old enough to have been working in the 90s in that boom. And we didn't quite understand the impact that was going to have, right? We didn't understand what the internet would do to us. We
Yeah,
made laws that were about internet shopping, not about social media, because we didn't understand social media was coming.
yeah,
Also, didn't really feel the full impact until the infrastructure was there, and most, if not everyone, depending on where you live, has connectivity.
yeah,
And then I see in India, it's these things
yes,
that's life changing. I don't
yeah,
believe AI will change our lives for people our age group the way that, or more than a device, a phone, the internet has. But we
yeah,
know from that 30-year period the depth of the impact it has, and it's
yeah,
happening so quickly. We know that it will be that kind of change again. So
yeah,
I think we are all sort of warned and have
yeah,
the opportunity to go off and learn. So constantly exploring, playing around with the AI, whether it's in your personal life, just to be comfortable with it, making sure you know how to prompt,
yeah,
learning what tools are out there that can make your business better and easier and how.
yeah,
It's a productivity tool right now. It's something that makes you more productive.
yeah,
Either it lets you do more or it gives you more free time. And
yeah,
I think we have to really, there's no point in resistance because it's
yeah.
coming. So how do you work with that flow? How do you make it flow in the way that suits you best?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And even yesterday, we were having the discussion on how one of the critical things AI is going to do for creators is reduce the budgets of making films. And, that is going to make that will create a lot of new storytellers out there who will have an opportunity to put themselves out there through AI. And I think that's one of the biggest pluses of AI. What do you see? And how do you foresee in terms of the kind of impact, like you said, the dot-com boom that happened, the social media was not predicted. We didn't know what it could
No.
possibly do. What do you see AI can possibly do that we are not able to see at this
Yeah.
point?
So I, if I knew the answer, I'd be worth a lot of money, right? I'm not giving you an answer from a crystal ball looking into the future.
Yeah.
In my job, I get to see a lot of people doing different things,
Yeah.
and I'm seeing some interesting stuff. I'm seeing the language models being taught how to abstain. So right now, it will always answer whether it knows or not. You do get hallucinations where it's just a blip, but you
Yeah.
also get wrong answers because it feels obliged to give you an answer. It wants to please you almost. So
Yeah.
it's being taught not to answer when it doesn't know the answer, which will be a big thing. For day-to-day life, we're seeing what's called agentic. I don't know if you've looked at that much. If you
Yeah.
think about the legal term agency, it's when you give somebody else the right to do something. And effectively, it's a step beyond language models where you have tools that you can get to do a thing. And that thing could be setting up an event on Eventbrite. It could be setting up a newsletter. It could be doing some of the edit in a production studio, different things depending on what you train it on. And I think we will see more of those tools.
Yeah.
I'm told that within the next 6 months, we can all expect to have an AI assistant. So that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons it's really important to start to understand how to get it to do what you want and not be dictated to by your AI because you don't understand it.
Yeah.
And then I think that the big thing that's coming down the line, they call it embodiment. So when you actually start to see the AI in devices, and when I say devices, I'm meaning vehicles, I'm meaning smart homes, I'm meaning robots.
Yeah.
I recently saw some robots that have developed real dexterity. So
Yeah.
they're actually able
Wow.
to use sort of intuition to box. Now, I'm not sure that that was the best thing to show me because I don't like the idea of an army of robots boxing. I prefer them to be doing my housework and washing my dishes. But I think those kind of robots are going to be visible in the next year or so.
Wow. Yeah.
And then they will start to gradually refine and be something that we can use in our homes and our lives. I'm
Yeah.
told that we should start to expect that AI will be a colleague. So you will
Yeah.
be working alongside an AI. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of strange getting your head around this concept that we're treating them almost like people.
Yeah. Oh my God. And they would have consciousness. They would have consciousness.
No, we're nowhere near that. And that's the difference. And that's why I keep
Yeah.
saying we have to remember these are tools, even when it's embodied, that we are in control of and we choose. We need to make sure that we're
Yeah.
very clear about how we manage that because they don't have consciousness. And the best they
Yeah.
can do is mimic our emotions, our feelings, our behaviors.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any ability to have that free thought in that way.
But what if they do the way it's
I think
moving?
I wouldn't worry about that for a long time. We're nowhere near that from everybody I speak to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's
So,
the singularity where AI actually can think for itself. And there's no, people, there's all sorts of conversations about it, but I have seen no obvious conversation where that looks like it's really happening.
so that's still far away.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the things that we're really worrying about are more like how can people use AI? We see it being used in warfare now. You've seen the conversations with Anthropic in the US government through the
Yeah.
Pentagon. That's revealed the scale that AI is used to pilot drones and manage those kind of things. So
Yeah.
we are seeing this technological shift that has moral and ethical consequences,
Yeah.
and those are really not, I can't emphasize this enough. Those are not decisions for individuals who are creating things. Those are decisions for lawmakers.
Yeah.
We need
Yeah.
our governments and our lawmakers
Yeah.
to keep a
Yeah.
working brief and make laws that are specific when they're needed.
Yeah.
Not
Totally.
to
So,
regulate, but to make sure that they protect us.
yeah, totally. So, Amanda, you're saying moral and ethical implications, consequences that we need to be careful. Of course, we know as an overview of this that yes, there's a lot of things that can affect us as creators, but as common people as well. where do you see as the biggest policy gaps that needs to be addressed right away by
Yeah.
the governments of all the countries? Like five bullet points, anything that comes to
Yeah.
your mind that.
I think what they did in the UK was actually quite smart. And I'm not sure if it was done intentionally, but it's what we ended up with. And they sort of did an audit of our regulated sectors. And the regulated sectors are things where you have obviously a regulator, but you have specific legislation. So things like finance and banking, healthcare, telecommunications, where there's a level of restriction. And I think making sure that that is done and kept under a watching brief, a constant review is really important, because those are sectors where there is a need for more regulation than the mainstream. I think
Right.
making sure, not just on AI, but generally, that our children are protected and we are very careful about what we expose them to. If
Yeah.
you know young people, or if you have children, you'll see the impact that some of the social media and things has had, and we
Yeah.
have to be very careful about what we let them have and how old they are. So I think a lot of the recent moves, Macron talked about it at the summit in his speech. I think that's really important. I think governments coordinating as much as possible on the key regulations where there are security and safety issues, I think
Yeah.
is important. And then I think promoting openness, because, and and India is doing this. If you want to have access to this technology, and the more we talk, the more we see that everybody needs to be able to get their hands on this. It can't be something that's closed. It can't be something that's really restricted and expensive. So I think
Yeah.
making sure that you are enabling your citizens to have access for their day-to-day life, for the tools that support their productivity and their work, and then also for your innovators. So I think for
Yeah.
me, those are the key things.
So the key things. Now, suppose, Amanda, of course, we are working all out to see that this happens right. But what if it goes in the wrong direction? Like in the next 5 years, do you see that we are going to, as a human species, what is the possibility of losing things that we should not lose if we not get this right?
I think that already has happened to us to some extent. And I don't know India well enough, but I know that in the UK and other places, we have globalized so much that sometimes we've lost some of our culture and our traditions. And we might see them at an event where somebody will portray it, or they'll perform and show some of the old ways and the old things. I don't know how important that is to people. It depends on your life views. I
Yeah.
think we have to be careful as society to keep our values, and
Yeah.
to make sure that
Lovely.
we're passing those along where appropriate to our kids across our communities. And I think that sense of community can also be lost in a digital world, and it's very important to try and keep that, and the importance of human interaction and
Yeah. Yeah. So culture, values, and the understanding of communities is
and
what
of
we
course,
should.
part of that is through art, right? Art and
Yeah.
performance and
Yeah.
sharing that is really important. And if you are using AI, depends what you're using it for. Personally, I prefer to use it for productivity rather than creative things. But
Yeah.
if you're using it in a creative sense, you have to remember it's
Yeah.
only mimicking. It's not,
Yes.
it can only, and it's mimicking. Somebody suggested to me that it makes us mediocre because
Yeah.
it goes for the average. It doesn't go for excelling, it goes for the middle of what it learns. And I think
Yes.
we have to remember that, and who we are and what we want.
Yeah, that is such an important point, Amanda. Using for productivity versus using it for creativity. I think that's such a great point. And of course, being in touch and interacting with filmmakers and artists, and saying that yes, it can give you a prompt of a script. It can give you like an idea, but it cannot give you a human experience, because
Exactly.
that lived experience is only with humans to actually bring it to a film, to an art, to
Yes.
that emotional depth. Without a human interfering, it's just not possible.
Yeah.
So Amanda, just to say that, what should right now is, what should creators or filmmakers do to keep their voice intact, to keep a control over their voice, the way they're seeing. on their work right now as they are getting in the middle of using AI? Like, suppose you're using it in a script, you're using it in making a film. What should thinkers or filmmakers or creators do to keep themselves intact?
I think it's probably the same advice again, which is find out from your peers, your contemporaries, what other people are using, share, collaborate, look at where people are saying that AI gives them a real advantage, understand control, make sure that you are, if you're allowing something like an agent or agentic AI to do
Yeah,
something for you, that you have set parameters, you understand the security around it. If you're giving it access to accounts, what accounts are they, how long is that for, why are you doing that? You're not doing it permanently. So if you're allowing it to do social media, you're allowing it to do, one tweet a day or whatever it happens to be. You're not just letting it do what it wants. Because and when I say what it wants, language is part of the problem. It makes it sound like it's choosing, but it will keep doing and doing and doing because you haven't given it clear parameters. So it's all about that control. um, I think a lot of people are using it for the sake of it, and sometimes that means it's actually less productive. So don't feel you
yeah,
have to do everything with it.
yeah,
Explore, take some time, find where it actually helps you. And then I think sometimes people call it critical thinking. I often call it discernment. But when I write and I get AI to look at something for me, I find I like that it helps me structure. I find I like that it gives me a first draft that I've
yeah,
trained on or given my data to,
yeah,
but I never use it the way it gives me it, right? Because I have that life experience you're talking about and I want to put
yeah,
my own voice and style on it. Sometimes it
yeah,
surprises me because it's helpful,
yeah,
but you really need that experience and that knowledge in what you're doing to get it right. And you bring your own flair, your creativity
yeah.
to it. Don't feel that you have to use what it gives you.
Yeah, totally. So, Amanda, one thing is I've been conflicted about, and I just thought this was a great opportunity to see how you are seeing it, and that is that artists have always, or the storytellers, they're interpreting the world from what is the material in front of them,
Hmm.
and it is said that nothing is truly original. It's
Yeah,
always
yeah.
connected to something that's already present in the world. So when we were talking about IPs and when we are talking about copyrights, do you see this is a conflicting point when we say that, okay, you are gathering from a data that's already there, you're seeing the world the way it's already there, so is there a conflict point there, or it's like we are seeing too much into it?
Conflict in what way?
In the sense that is there even a conflict, because our interpretation of the world for an artist is something that's already out there,
Yeah, yeah,
and when we talk about using the datas to create whatever we are, it's already out there.
yeah.
Finally it is our perspective, and that also could be challenged as an original perspective.
I think
So
there's that sort of sense. Sometimes you see it in inspirational messages. Whether it's a message on a tea bag or something you pull out of a bowl or see on somebody's wall, that you are absolutely unique. There has never been another you, and there has never been another human with
yeah,
the set of experiences you personally have. And I
yeah,
think that brings us to an interpretation of anything that we see or do that is unique. You can't maybe have an original thought or an original storyline, or, because so much has already been done, but you
yeah,
still put your own spin on it, which is why people go and watch a movie, right? Because every
yeah,
time it's a little bit different. I
yeah,
remember when people started talking about fake news, well,
yeah,
all news is almost fake news because it's
yeah,
always one person's perception of, or a group of people's perception of a set of facts, right? And those
yeah,
facts will be interpreted so differently depending on your life experiences and your political views and your social views. And uh, I think that that's the essence of humanity, and that's not something AI can bring. It can
yeah,
help you, but it can't bring
yeah.
it.
It cannot bring out.
No.
While since you're in the middle of it,
Yeah.
Amanda, what is it that is there something that's bothering you as somebody being in the thick of things that needs to be amplified in the next few months, that we need to really really work? When
Yeah.
you're talking about going to Switzerland, and what are the key things that you're going to talk there?
I want to see more about a joined up approach. I think we need to be more formal, not in terms of process, but about being aware of tools and standards and making people aware that these things exist for their benefit and what they are and how they should be used. I think that joined up piece is very important. I think that removing some of the fear that's been created by the media
Yeah,
the last couple of years, there's been so much hype and it's been so consistent.
yeah,
And I think it's been used in some ways by certain politicians as a political tool to detract from other things. And it creates a lot of negativity. And I think that when we looked at the .com boom, it was all
yeah,
positive, right? Everybody was excited about the possibility and the potential. And I think it would be good if we could view AI in that way rather than all the fear and the doom mongering that we see. So I think that that shift would be a really good and important thing. And then I also feel that some of the friction around copyright
yeah,
is really negative and it's almost a red herring. It diverts us from the real issues.
yeah,
I think the real issue is how do we protect the creative sector? How do we protect the content creators? Beyond the pure creatives into researchers, into software developers, what can we do to ensure that people have a future? And I think there's a big piece that governments are trying to get their heads around that's not easy around the future of work. And I think we're seeing
yeah,
enterprises, the big companies doing that too. What does it mean if we're going to have more productivity tools and we're going to be more productive? Will we really be more productive? Does it mean that people will work less? India, I'm told, is always on. Maybe India will get some sleep. Maybe that's a good thing.
yeah, yeah. But Amanda, do you see that there a cultural difference in different regions? Like we are culturally different people. Do you see that policies need to be designed around that, or do you see that it's going to be like one whole thing for the world? Like everyone is on internet and everyone is using the internet, and so there's no difference actually as such.
There
Yeah,
are differences. So, an easy example of that is that we here use WhatsApp quite a lot, but we don't use it the way India does, right? India lives on WhatsApp.
yeah,
Every
true.
conversation is amplified there. So
Yeah,
there are ways that people, culturally live and ways of communication. When we were aware that we wanted to do something for the summit, and we did quite a lot
yeah,
around the summit, I think I've been in India 4 or 5 times in the last year because we came out and we participated in other people's events. We hosted small events. We got a sense of how India works because every place is different. Every place has its own ways of doing things. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, sometimes they can learn from others, sometimes you adapt to that culture. But I think there's a surprising amount of commonality amongst humanity, right?
yeah,
They go through, you're born, you die. In between, you're going to get married, you're going to have children, you're going to have families, or you're not, and you're going to have connections and community. And I
yeah.
think what I saw in India, and I've just come back from Africa actually, and I saw it
Wow.
there
Yeah,
too. And we see it in Europe, and we've seen it for decades in the US. We
yeah,
have the same challenges, and we're
yeah,
going through the same adoption process with AI. You might have the big techs in the US, and China might seem to be ahead in open source, but humans are
yeah,
adapting to this environment and working it out. And some of the basic things, the outcomes, the decisions might be slightly nuanced, they might be slightly different because you're in a different country with different culture, but most of it is the same. Most of the challenges, like access to data so that innovators can compete with the bigger companies, that's a universal challenge. Understanding how people feel about their data being accessed and what they want, done with that, what protections they want, that's a universal challenge. So
yeah.
I actually think there is more commonality across those geographical and geopolitical boundaries than we think. And I think it's an important time for us to engage with those and
Yeah,
be humans together. There's so much disruption in the world at the moment.
yeah, yeah, totally. So if there was a Shakespeare living in today's times, Amanda, and he had to interact with AI, what are a couple of things that he needed to be careful before he was creating Macbeth and Othello and everything else?
Was Shakespeare not accused of copyright infringement? I think he was. I think there was
No,
a turnaround.
he did get influenced, is what I heard. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. I think we just have to be careful that when we're using other people's work, we're crediting them. And I
yeah,
think that that's even before the AI boom, I was seeing a trend where people were using other people's stuff and not attributing them. And I think that's really important because even those who give open and free licensing to use their work, which I do in mine,
yeah,
it's usually conditioned on some acknowledgement that they were a source, and that often doesn't happen. And I
yeah,
think that obviously we still have to check rights, but where you are able to use other people's things, or even if you're just inspired by them, I think it's an important base point for society that we
yeah,
recognize everybody else's contribution to what we do.
yeah,
So I think
yeah.
that's important.
Yeah. So in these times of AI where everything is getting sort of pulled from everywhere else, what do you see a point where a creator can and must be recognized if their work is getting pulled into some other work
This is the big
places?
challenge, right? And it's whether it's simply the equivalent of well trained models don't copy,
Yeah.
and it depends on your processes, and this is partly why standards and ways people do things really matter. But well trained models do not copy. They make something that's a transient copy as they're learning from it, and we've always had these transient copies in computing, which are never counted as a copyright because they just exist for fractions of a second, and there's something that it learns from, and it's the equivalent of us reading a book. And I think it is incredibly complex that we really, in an ideal world, the structure
Yeah.
would be such that you were recognizing what you trained the model on. And I think that that's the piece that we need to move forward on, that we need to understand the data that's been used and acknowledge, even if it's not a copy. And this is what one of the, when I said to you, I think copyright's a red herring. I think it allows some of the big companies to get into a debate that distracts from the real issues. And the real issues for me include that attribution, that acknowledgement of whose work that we have read. So when we do reports and research at OpenUK, we do quite a lot of it. We
Yeah.
include a big long list at the end of everything we've read. Whether we actually use it in the report, whether we quote it, we put it in there because we know that that helps to shape our opinion. Even if we disagree with it, it
Yeah.
shaped our opinion. And I
Yeah.
think that's what we need to get to. And there are different technologies that can be used for that. I'm skeptical that licensing and permissions is ever going to work. And I really do think that we need to be pushing governments to build alternative models when it comes to funding and payment of creatives. But I absolutely believe that that acknowledgement of what you've used in your learning process should be acknowledged.
Yeah, totally. And if you had to recommend this is the best AI work being done, or this is the most ethical and moral AI that's out there, what would you recommend the creatives to use?
Honestly, I don't know the right answer to give you.
Yeah,
I think it is very much evolving, and I think that a lot of the what's good depends on what you do. I was at an event recently with the mobile telecommunications industry.
yeah,
What they are doing is all the big mobile companies are getting together and they are collaboratively reviewing the different tools, the different models that are available to them, and they are scoring them for their specific purposes, and they are then training on their own data, because when the models are trained, they're trained on publicly available data. And what they're doing is taking specific company data that they all have, so that models learn to recognize within the mobile and telco space how to be good models for that space. And I think that's the kind of thing that needs to happen in every sector so that you get the best suited to you. It doesn't mean that we're all special and we need to build from scratch. We do have to train it in the same way as we're seeing models that already exist being localized in local languages and that kind of thing. I think for India, the Savram piece is interesting. And they have built small language models that require less infrastructure and compute to run. So that's a very conscious decision that the Indian government has invested in that because it suits your environment. And I think that's the challenge that we all have. It's finding the thing that suits our purpose, our location, and our needs. And I don't know what would be best for you. If I was talking to software engineers, I would say that there's a Chinese model called Kimi that all the developers seem to be using. It's getting really, really good traction. It seems to
Yeah.
be really well trained for what they want.
Yeah.
I'm less sure what producers, and that goes back to what I said earlier about get people collaborating, get groups of you together, talk amongst yourselves, and find out what people are using and how effectively, because that shared data will be invaluable to you.
Yeah. So are you are you optimistic or are you pessimistic about this boom that's happening? Just one word.
Optimistic.
Okay. Lovely. That's great. That's great. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much for your time. This was a great, quick chat, and I hope to stay in touch with you and see how things unfold in UK as well. And hopefully, everybody will come together to form the right policies for all of us. So
I hope
yes.
so. I hope so. But definitely, you should be an instrument of change, and you should be making sure your sector get together as well as doing